welcome you to today's Global Epilepsy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Global Epilepsy Conference. I'm Judy Schwingle, one of the speakers, and I'm here today with the honor of introducing Gigi Sabat. She's a global motivational speaker that will rock your world. Take it away, Gigi.
Thank you so much, Judy. I truly appreciate you. And it's such an honor to have each and every one of you here today. Thank you all. And thank you to our sponsors. And thank you to all of our speakers. Truly appreciate each and every one of you. At this time, I'd like to welcome our first speaker, and that is Renee Walters. Welcome, welcome. She's an amazing speaker and a powerhouse. Welcome, Renee.
Hi, thank you so much, Gigi, for just letting me join your platform. I appreciate you. Epilepsy is something that's dear to my heart. My daughter is, well, just a little bit about me. My name is Renee Walters, and I've been in the Atlanta area for the last 20 years, and I have a teenage son, 17. And then I also have my daughter, Victoria, who will be turning 5 next month. She has epilepsy as well as cerebral palsy, CVI, and a few other diagnoses. We'll be here all day. But yes, I had a traumatic birth injury. She was injured during the process of me having an emergency C-section. And I had no clue that this was going on once I woke up from my C-section. I was excited, ready to see my baby. And my husband had this look on his face of just like doom. And I'm just like, what's wrong? And he explained to me everything that happened, far as her having seizures, like 10 to 20 seizures every minute, and how they had to rush her to another hospital to get into a cooling bed to cool off her brain. And I was just like, I was in utter shock because I didn't, I walked in a hospital completely normal and I was expecting to leave out with a normal baby, and that didn't happen. So me and my husband's thoughts, because after we got to the hospital and they explained everything that was going on, we knew immediately that our lives had changed. And so it was like, now what? What do we do? And one thing that I didn't want to do was lose ourselves in the process of being special needs parents, because we pour so much into doctor's appointments and therapy and just everything that comes along with having a medically fragile child. We often forget about ourselves. Like, it was at one point, I didn't make a doctor's appointment for like a year because I had so many of Victoria's appointments and therapy and school and everything. And me and my husband just had to take a look at ourselves like, hey, we can't let this change us. We have to keep our normal routine. Like, we have to just do the things that we were used to doing and just make this our new normal. So everything that the doctors was telling us about Victoria, how she wouldn't be able to think or how she wouldn't be able to laugh or play, like all of those things aren't true, because my baby does all of those things. So please don't let doctors tell you things, because you know what, God has the final say. I used to be paralyzed and they told me I would never walk again, and I walk. So definitely always go to the higher source. But like, in all of this, everything that was going on with her, we just had to like remain normal, be ourselves, and know like this is what we're dealing with. Far as epilepsy, is so many different seizures out there. We were doing research after research just to make sure that we could take care of Victoria properly. Like, sometimes we can't do certain things because it may trigger a seizure. So we have to find the alternatives so we could still have a normal life or have that normalcy in our lives as far as Victoria. And it's been hard because this is new to us. Like, I have a 17-year-old son, so this was new to me all over again, far as having another baby. Like, I started over and I wanted to do so many things different because I've learned so much more. Like, the internet has shown us so many just different ways of parenting and everything. And I was just excited to start over. But this journey has been very enlightening. I've become more passionate. Like, I've always been compassionate, but it just gives you a little bit more empathy for people that are going through certain, because you just never know what people may be going through. But this just gives me a little bit more empathy because every day is different. Like, you don't know if one day you're playing and everything's fine, and then the next thing you know, you're in a hospital or you're given the seizure medicine because she's having a seizure. Like, so we just learn to enjoy every day as it is, and make stuff our new normal. Like Victoria, she is a quadriplegic. She has no functionality of her upper and lower extremities. Like 70% of her brain is damaged, but we live a happy life. Like my baby loves the water. I take her to the beach every year for her birthday. She's been to the museum. She's been to the aquarium. Like she's been to a lot of different, she's been camping. So we try to like do everything we would normally do. We just adapt. And so I just want to say to you guys that has medically fragile children that although it may not be easy, you just got to keep going and cling to your village, create a village. And sometimes your regular friend, like your friends with neurotypical children, may not understand what you're going through because they don't have a child that is medically fragile. So they would never really understand. The only thing they could do is like, yeah, I get it, or you got this. But it's find a village that has someone that's just going through the same thing as you, or have a child that is medically fragile and can understand them late night texts of, oh my God, this is just crazy. Like who you can vent to and have that space. Like I had to create that space for me because none of my friends had medically fragile children, except for one. So me and her created a space where if she's in the hospital, I'm cooking food for them. If we got to go to the hospital, they're cooking food for the house. So definitely it's important to have that village and just find your village. Like I found a few friends just going to doctor's appointments because I'm there so much. That's like a second home and you see the same people. And so you tend to create that village because no one else gets it but you if you've been in that situation. So definitely I can leave my information for you to reach out if you have any more questions about just how to cope being a special needs parent. A lot of times they tell me like, oh my God, you are doing an amazing job at this. Like, I have no other choice. Like, what other option do I have? Because if I don't take care of my baby, then what? So I have no other option. And I just pray one day that they find all the right tools in the medical industry where it can lighten our load and we don't have to go through all these things as far as birth and just take more care of us as women in the hospitals and pay more attention to us. And I'm a big advocate for women and their bodies and their choices. And just if you have any questions, you want to just talk to me, you want to vent, I am here. And I want to say, Gigi, thank you again for this platform. And to everybody, just keep going.
Thank you so much, Renee.
Thank you so much, Renee. And now our next speaker is Ken Gerber. Ken Gerber is an experienced advisor at Capstone Partners. Just taking a moment to pull it up here.
Technical difficulties there.
Okay, it happened.
I have 10 on here.
And then maybe again, they take some out when they purchase.
Oh my goodness, it went way over to the middle of the.
All right. Hey, my name is Ken Gerber and I'm with Capstone Partners. And I've spent over a decade immersed in the work and working with the lives of seniors. I've been absorbing their narratives, their fears and their challenges. I heard the recurring lament of, quote, I'm struggling to make ends meet on Social Security, unquote. This resonated really deeply with me. Thus, I started to transition to becoming a financial guide because I believe that everyone merits a secure retirement. Now, this is so important. And it's not only important to you, but it's important to what we're talking about today. Because today we're talking about kids. And we're talking about kids And many of them have a special need. We're talking about kids who need more than some other children, and they're going to need more help over their lifetime because of some challenges. Now, I want to go into what I call the gift of a lifetime. This is a lasting connection. This is going to make a huge difference, and we're going to go over why. Now, first off, this is not legal information. I'm not a attorney or anything like that. So let's get started with giving your children or grandchildren a financial head start. Teach them responsibility of protecting the ones that they love, and then giving them a gift they won't outgrow. Giving the gift of participating in whole life insurance to a child may help you do all of these things. That's why it's called the gift of a lifetime. Now, why participate in the whole life? And why does it make sense for children? How can you customize it? And then we'll wrap up with some questions and answers and where to go to get those answered. All right. Now, why whole life on a child? Why would anyone want to do this? Well, let's go into some of those reasons. First, children are healthier, so they pay lower premiums. And you can get a 10, 12, even a 20-year payment option. So you can have it paid off before, and then they get the benefits of it after you're gone. So there is so many good reasons to get this for your children. Now, there are some ways that you can your child can grow with this insurance. Now, one is the guaranteed insurability rider. And this is important for kids who may not qualify later in life for insurance. All right, let me give you an example. Maybe you have type 1 diabetes. The chances of your child getting that are pretty high, right? And yet, with type 1 diabetes, you probably don't qualify for insurance. Now, if you get them this insurance as a child, they still qualify up to 18 years old. They will qualify. And yet, later on in life, they can get additional coverage regardless of health problems that come up. And they can get it periodically or at life events. I mean, you can set it up for life events and then say maybe they get married or they have a kid. Those types of life events, they can add it and they can get up to $1 million at periodic, an additional $1 million at periodic intervals over their lifetime. Now, there obviously is an additional cost to it, but I mean, for someone who might not have that option and is then getting married or having kids, that can make a huge difference in their life. Some of the other things that you could do, and I'm a big fan of paid up additions on dividends. What this does, it increases the death benefit when dividends are paid out, which increases the cash value over time. Now, the dividends are not guaranteed, but Mass Mutual has been in business for over 100 years and they paid a dividend. So the likelihood is great. Now, it is totally customizable. There are options to fit your child. It doesn't matter what age they are. And you can use those dividends and they can be paid and become a birthday gift to them every year. Or it can continue for the life of the child, and well, it will continue for the life of the child, and those dividends can continue to be paid. And then now here again, these dividends are not guaranteed. Now they can access cash value at certain times throughout their lives. And maybe when they graduate college, they want to take some out and they pay off their student loans. Or maybe as a wedding, for their wedding, they take out some, it's either a gift or to pay for their wedding. And then maybe again, they take some out when they purchase a home and to get the down payment. All of these things can come out of that cash value. Now, you want to make these distributions selectively because they can affect how the total amount of the insurance, depending upon how much they remove. But this can be amazing for them and can help them throughout their lives. And then they can still have more at retirement. Now, you can customize this and include we're hoping it would do for them. And then explain the value that you think it's going to provide in their future. And then you keep that letter with the policy and a favorite photo of you and present it to the child when they take ownership. And then they can keep that throughout their lives and know how much you cared and how much you did for them. All right, so if you have questions, contact me. Again, my name is Ken Gerber. I'm with Capstone Partners. And you can email me at kgerber@financialguide.com, or you can call me at 385-475-2697. Again, that number is 385-475-2697. All right, well, I hope you learned some really incredible things today. This is a great option, and go ahead and give me a call and let's find out if there is a policy for a special child in your life. Thank you so much for being with me today, and you have a great day.
Thank you so much, Ken. We truly appreciate you. Now, our next speaker is Dr. Tanya Gold. Dr. Tanya Gold is a family holistic medicine doctor. She's also an inspirational speaker, author. She teaches yoga and laughter yoga. And her motto is, I don't laugh just because I'm happy. I'm happy because I laugh. Welcome, Dr. Tanya Gold.
Hey, Gigi. Hi, everyone. I'm so blessed to be on this call. I want to thank you for having this. So I've been in practice over 20 years, and I've seen a lot of patients with epilepsy and patients who are suffering, especially children. So right now, one of my primary work is dealing with holistic relief, where I certify people for cannabis, and just seeing remarkable differences. We used to give a lot of children phenytoin and just the typical typical traditional medications for epilepsy. Unfortunately, they have a lot of side effects. And if you actually look at a lot of studies, they haven't been studied in children. So children would just not be themselves. Parents would tell me they're giving their children traditional medications, they're gaining a lot of weight or having all these side effects, just not feeling well. They feel like their child is just not themselves. And that could happen with antidepressants or antipsychotics, again, not really studied in children. But the reason I mention this is cannabis is a whole different bag of worms, in the sense that we're dealing with a natural plant that's been around for centuries. And safely, I recommend to use it usually through tinctures, not smoking it or vaping, but they do have an inhaled form, which is more like an inhaler. So if kids need a quick acting dose, say they're actually having an active seizure, it can help. So I'm going to share some stories if that's okay, because I know I remember things from stories and just makes it interesting. So because of HIPAA, I can't say their actual names, but I'm going to just tell you a kind of fictional name for that. But I'll talk about Lila. So Lila first is a child who's had seizures, like multiple throughout the day and multiple per hour. And these are disabling seizures to the point that she can die from them. So her dad was always on red alert. He was just always scared because she, wasn't even the parents, the doctor said, she's maxing out on all the traditional medications and they're not working. So just prepare for her not to make it. And they were literally telling her there's no hope. So, but Lila was, the parents were like, we're not giving up on our daughter, just like the first speaker was mentioning. So they actually found out about cannabis. It was through Charlotte's Web. And they started giving her the cannabis. And it was amazing, not just overnight, but over, some periods of time, her seizures started to wane. So instead of having them every, multiple times per hour, she was noticing maybe a few times per day. And now we've seen her about 7 months later, which is the recertification process time. And she's told me maybe she has a seizure a week, like 1 or 2 per week, but they're mild and nothing life-threatening. And she's doing great. She's growing. She's actually able to go to school now, able to function with others and just happy, because obviously if you're constantly going through seizures, that's no way to live. This is another woman that's actually written up. She is in her 30s. I'll call her Debbie. And she was diagnosed with musicogenic seizures. So if you're like, what the heck is that? It's actually when you have a response to music. Those were her triggers for seizures. And if you can imagine having music as a trigger, she can't sometimes talk on the phone because, they'll play music if you're on hold. She couldn't go out to restaurants because they can play music. Even doctors' offices were a challenge. So her doctor basically said, we're trying traditional therapies. They were not working. So let's try, you may want to consider cannabis. And she did. Her husband was in the military, so they were a little vigilant, a little concerned about doing it. But then we spoke to them about it. The nice thing in our office, we spend time with the patients. We explain. So if you have no experience with cannabis, we take you from step 0, to follow you up, and you can call with any questions. But for those that were experienced, the cannabis that they use today, it is purified. It is watched, responsibly, so you know what you're actually getting. And then the nice part is sometimes patients are just getting CBD, because a lot of for seizures, we know CBD by itself without the THC, so it's not going to get you high or anything, that can actually help in high doses for many patients. So that was working. We know sometimes ketogenic diets also can be very beneficial. Anyway, long story short, with Debbie, so much better. I didn't even recognize her because the first time I saw her, she was in her night clothes. Can you imagine just not being able to leave your house because she didn't know if she's going to hear music anywhere? So she literally was isolated, and she had children, and she's like, I can't live like this. So thank God. And, it can make you depressed, suicidal. Thankfully, she didn't go down that road, but she got treatment for her seizures. Now she barely has them. The last time, I think she said a few months ago, but it's again mild. Cannabis really helped. And I'm not going to say cannabis is for everybody, but for the majority of patients that I've seen, again, I know this is Global Epilepsy Conference, but it can help so many other ailments, including anxiety, for sleep, for depression, for pain, it helps with cancer, especially from chemotherapy if you get nausea. But with the studies, if you actually look at the hardcore literature for epilepsy, it's resounding yes for many benefits. There's many studies to support the use of cannabis for epilepsy. So again, just sharing this because it's been a light in my life. And, as a physician, sometimes, we can't help every patient with certain diseases, but with the epilepsy, we've been able to help a majority of patients, young and old. And it just feels good when you can have a patient come back smiling and, now she can play with her kids. She can actually go outside to the movie theater. She can actually pick up a phone and make a phone call, go out to a restaurant. So I know we sometimes take those things for granted, but she wasn't able to do those things. So she's very appreciative. Her husband is ecstatic because, you know, he loves his wife and wants to spend time with her, and now they can do it outside the home. So I just wanted to share that. That's my take. If you do want to reach me, I'm on all the social media platforms at Dr. Tanya Gold. I'm happy to answer questions. So you can always put them in the chat. I'll leave my tagline if you just want to DM me with how you heard from me from this platform, from this conference, then I'm happy to, you know, answer anything that you need. But I just feel, again, so privileged and honored to be here today. And thank you, Gigi, for putting this on. It's, again, truly a pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Tanya Go. We truly appreciate you. And I do have a question for you. And so what if someone witnessed or observed someone having a seizure? What do you suggest that that individual do?
I mean, the first, you want to try to make sure that you support them, that they don't knock into anything. So it does depend where they are. Obviously, if they're in a hospital, you know, you still, even if they come out of the seizure, you still want to call 911 and do all that stuff. If you have a child with seizures, I always recommend getting knowing CPR and knowing all the life support. But the main thing is that they don't bite their tongue. So you want to support their head. You want to make sure they don't thrash, but don't stick your fingers inside their mouth because you don't want them to bite down or anything. But you do want to try to support them and make sure they're not going to hurt themselves in any way. We actually had a gentleman I was interviewing about his seizures. And right as he finished telling me exactly what his seizures looked like, he actually had a seizure, and he was 350 pounds. So luckily I had some nurses, because I wasn't, you know, enough size to hold him up. And they came in, we had like 3 big size nurses come, and they were able to support along with myself. And then we got him the medications. If it's a family member, of course, you have the medicine, try to get him the medicine. If you have cannabis, you can actually use the inhaler right away to stop the seizures. So that's what I would recommend.
Thank you, Dr. Tanya Gold.
You're welcome.
Now, our next speaker is Judy Schwingle. Judy is a faith-based master transformational life coach and CEO of JS Heart and Soul Health and Life Coaching. Judy also is a blogger and a speaker who promotes women finding confidence, power, and voice to allow them to embody their truest selves and live in their purpose. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you, Gigi, and thank you so much for including me in this conference. I am a coach, but first of all, I was an epileptic child. So, you know, I'm a little emotional at the moment because hearing Tanya and Renee's stories, I can relate so much to that. My talk today is epilepsy from an insider's viewpoint. And growing up as a child with epilepsy, it was always a challenge. And it's a brainstorm, literally. This is a graphic of what a seizure might look like in the brain. So I want to tell you, where we're going and what we will be discussing. I'm just going to move this a little bit. We're going to look at what does epilepsy mean to me personally, and understanding the basics of epilepsy. If people aren't familiar or that watch this, what the very basics are, to keep or not to keep, and the societal pressures that I experienced, and my resilience out of resistance, today's reality, and how God had a path for my purpose. So let's get started. Ooh, that was quick. So what was epilepsy for me? It was a secret. It was a big secret that we didn't talk about at home. It was something that was socially unacceptable. It was whispers in the corner when, they were talking about my parents were talking about my medical condition. And it's unsettling for the young child. My seizures exhibited from age 18 months to 7 years by the time they got me finally stabilized. And listening to Dr. Tanya, I had, 20, 25 grand mal seizures a day, and then had absence seizures in between. And this was in the 60s. So the world, society, and drugs were so much different. It was very hard for the doctors to regulate my medications, which made it threatening to my person and to my body. It was threatening as far as what was being done to me. Having an encephalogram can be scary to a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old. Especially in the 60s, they would place this, I told Gigi it was like wet Play-Doh would be the contact point for my encephalograms, and then they put the electrodes on and put all of these wires in a machine. Try and explain that to a child, because in that era the doctors talked to the parents. The doctors didn't come in and talk directly to the child in the child's language. What a great thing we have learned over the decades. It was threatening because I had a sense of being the problem in the household and not belonging or having to perform in order to be welcome to stay. The overwhelm is where I have the societal beliefs. Many lay people and physicians of that time believed that epileptic kids could not learn, read, write. And just like Renee was saying, our brain has such great capacity to adapt and change and expand. So my parents were being told all this doom and gloom of me being developmentally delayed. And I felt it as oppression and made me feel that the world didn't have or didn't give me much value. So with the medications, there were a lot of pills, there was a lot of testing and lab work. My parents were blue collar workers, and they didn't go past the 8th grade. They were Depression era kids and had to quit work or quit school to go to work for their families. And they didn't feel educated enough to question doctors or speak up or be an advocate. In that day, you just did what the doctor said or what the school said. I sensed their overwhelm, and I kind of took it on as a young child, and that translated to fear and worry for me that went right into my adulthood. I tried to step back in the shadows and observe the adults and find ways that I could anticipate and be helpful and be the good kid. It was very hard to try and navigate being everyone's everything, and it went right into adulthood. I saw neurologists regularly. The hospitalizations were probably 30% of my childhood, 30 to 50%. I was almost at the hospital as much as home. And that era, parents weren't allowed to stay with the kids. It was an hour drive by the time my parents got to the hospital. Then they talked to the doctor, and then they were leaving again. And it really brought a sense and feeling of abandonment to me. So, the noises in the hospital, the different people changing shifts and different people's personalities. So it became isolating as well, because I was the child who was the oddity in the family. Or, in school, I slept a lot. The medications, then, like Dr. Tanya said, were extremely strong. They sedated, they made you groggy. I know I was on at least Valium, phenobarbital, and Dilantin, and other experimental medications, one of which put me in reverse isolation and wiped out all of my platelets, so I could have died. It was frightening. Being that kid in school who was sleepy, I nearly slept through all of first grade. I had an old school teacher that, was not happy with me. She thought I was lazy and literally called me stupid. I would start, I'd go home with a stack of papers and homework. I'd start waking up a little bit more around dinner time, and after supper, my parents would set me down, give me, help read the directions. I'd do the work. And I'd take it back and she'd tell me my parents did my work for me, because there's no way I could sleep through school and do as good a work as I'd done. It was very demoralizing. I couldn't play like the other kids played. They didn't want me to climb on, jungle gyms, be on the high slide, do anything, overly contact sport type. So I sat on the sidelines during gym class a lot, because if it was dodgeball, forget it. I was out. They weren't going to let me play. Between between first grade and second grade, you can see in the picture here, this is me as a healthy 1-year-old, happy, smiling. This is kindergarten. You can see my eyes are a little sleepy and I've got a closed mouth smile. The closed mouth smile came from the Dilantin I was taking, and it literally caused my gums to swell so much that I only had white little slits in my gums, which made me look different and brought on even more teasing and taunting by other kids. And this is second grade, the extreme weight gain that I had had and looking just as groggy. So the confusion I had was that I struggled to understand why I was always at the doctor, why they were always poking and prodding at me and drawing labs. I felt fine. I wanted to play. I was a kid, and I didn't understand why my mom cried every time she and my dad talked about me. One of the most confusing things for me was my closest sister is 10 years older than me. So if I was 5, she was 14, 15. She became very mean and physically hurting me, pinching and poking and so forth. But I adored her. I looked up to her, and I overheard a conversation with her and my mother she's saying that, everything's always about Judy. Typical teenage statement. But then she said, I wish she'd never been born. So reinforcing all of these beliefs. These and other events left me wondering, why did God make me this way? I grew up in the Catholic faith. I went to church and learned about God and all the rules of God. But what I wasn't taught about was how he forms us for a purpose and how merciful he is. So that was a piece that was missing for me. Let's do just some basic understanding of epilepsy. Seizures versus epilepsy. All seizures are similar to an electrical storm in the brain. You can call it brainstorming. So you see all of these electrical stimulus or firing in the brain, and the brain can't handle it, and it physically reacts. That with a seizure, It's generally a one-time occurrence because of a root cause, because of a head trauma, because of high fevers in babies. It has a reason. And once you understand the core reason, then you can treat it. Profound epilepsy with children like Dr. Tanya is talking about, or adults, and Renee, that is very difficult to handle, and my heart goes out to them. Epilepsy is a complex condition and many, many causes. To diagnose epilepsy, you have to have, skipping around here. 2 or more unprovoked seizures at any time in your life, meaning that there was no physiological known reason. This is just a diagram for you of the electrodes that they put on. I tried to find something that was of my era, and there was well over, I'd say over 100 electrodes put on your head through your hair, as you can see in this little girl laying there having her electrodes placed. And then the last is an example of an EEG, an electroencephalogram, and this is how they truly confirm seizures and epilepsy, and note multiple high spikes on that graph to diagnose it. Auras. You hear people talk about auras. Auras are more than a spiritual energy. You hear about them in the spiritual world. That's not what I'm talking about. The International League of Epilepsy, against epilepsy, I have my numbers back or letters backwards, defines epileptics auras as a focal aware seizure, meaning you are alert, you know what's going on, that occurs in one area of the brain while someone's awake. Up to 65% of epileptics report they have an aura. And there's many different forms. They can be visual, they can be auditory, they could be a smell, a taste, a sound. It can be behavioral. Someone can become very agitated prior to having a seizure. The crystal on the right that you see is sort of what I would see. And I described it as a crystal kaleidoscope would float in front of my face. And I knew I would soon have a seizure as I got older and understood it. That type of precursor carried through into my adult life. When I would get migraines, I would get the same type of floating kaleidoscope. To keep or not to keep? That was the question for my family. As a child, understanding that I was enduring stigma from society, bullying from kids, there was educational bias because they didn't believe that I could do the work. There was shame that I had it, we didn't talk about it. There was professional advice because the experts of the day, both medically and educationally, didn't think, that epileptic child, who they later found out had dyslexia and visual perception disorders, was going to learn much. The psychologist told my mother, you might as well buy her a typewriter. She's never going to be able to write. That wasn't true. And one thing that I wrote down in my notes already is not giving up has been a theme. And I truly believe God gave the children with epilepsy, those parents, for that reason. My mother was 5 foot tall if she was an inch, and she was a feisty person. The experts were telling her and my father, because of the learning problem and the epilepsy, that I should be placed in an epileptic institution. And the places where they were located were called epileptic colonies, just like the lepers in the Bible. On the or left side of this screen, we'll get into that because my parents wouldn't talk about or say the word epilepsy. It was always the problem. Whatever you call it, epilepsy, seizures, spells, it's having the same effect. And looking at the spell part where the word came from, you read the top, but there is no bodily infirmity, not even leprosy or epilepsy, which cannot be caused by witches. For we have often found that certain people have been visited with epilepsy or the falling sickness by means of, they believe that people buried eggs inside of the dead bodies of witches. This whole quote is from a guidebook for Inquisition written in the 1400s that in 1690s they used for the Salem trials. So if you were an epileptic during that time, they believed you were a witch. Later on, others have believed that, you're possessed with demonic beings or Satan. It's a physiological problem, folks. Let's accept it as that and move forward. It's scary. People don't understand scary, so they put a label on it. I have dealt with the overcome by loving on my mother. She was feisty, like I said. She sat me down with flashcards. Before flashcards were a thing, they were index cards she wrote on and wrote words and letters. I memorized the letters and I memorized the words as they were written, because with dyslexia, if I went to write it, my brain translated the letters differently, or I couldn't read the word on the page unless I memorized what it looked like. It was a picture. To write, she taught me a writing method called Palma method that she had learned as a child, where you make concentric circles and jagged marks and so forth, and then you hold your pen a certain way and your arm is resting. So it was involved. But as a left-handed person, I write clearly. I write straight up and down. There's no slant to my writing. And I don't curl my hand around. So she taught me to read and to write. Thank you, Mom. So how did God show up through all this? God was there in the beginning at my birth. My mother was hemorrhaging and almost died having me. I say this, and I'm sorry if it offends anyone, but I was literally born through the blood. And events in my life, God showed up repeatedly. In the hospital, when I would be visiting, this was my house. When I would be in the hospital, the nuns would come and pray with me. And that was my first introduction to the Catholic Church, really. But then I had an occasion where I heard a man talking on the other side of the curtain in the room I was in with my roommate. And I knew she was sick and I knew she wasn't getting better. But this man was talking to her that everything was going to be okay. And she would be fine. I thought that was odd. A nurse came in and I said, "Who's over there?" And she walked over and she goes, "Honey, there's nobody over there." I believe that was God talking to her because she passed away that night. When I was a little older, still in the Catholic faith, I would go to church and always sit in the front on the edge to see what was going on. There was a visit from the local bishop. And as the service was ending and they were taking the incense by, he stopped, put his hand on my head and prayed over me, blessed me, and said, "This child will do great things." When I was 16, really struggling with being that different person and having epilepsy, I didn't tell anyone. I went to a Christian retreat and they did a transformational prayer, and that was new at the time, not anything I'd ever experienced. And they asked us to just wait and be quiet, be still, and wait, see if God talked to them or Jesus talked to them. Jesus talked to me. He showed up in a vision and told me that he was there at the beginning. He was there now, and he always would be. So during the journey of being an epileptic or having an epileptic child, look for God's protections. They're there. Look for the positive purpose of this child being epileptic, you being the parent of an epileptic, or you, the person being an epileptic. What is that purpose? And how can you serve God through that experience? Because that is where I'm at. All of my experiences, from my epilepsy to other events in my life, I am sure God brought me here for. There is a public embarrassment to seizures. If you have no control over a seizure, I was asked this once, if you have no control over a seizure, why would you be embarrassed? Well, think about it. It's physically and socially disruptive. It's frightening. Some people during a seizure might lose their bodily functions, urinate, defecate. There's no way of hiding it when you're having a seizure, as opposed to, say, a diabetic feeling their blood sugar dropping, they can step away and drink and so forth. And then when you come out of the seizure, the onlookers, the looks of pity, of those that are staring or those that are trying not to look at you because they don't want to be seeing this. And then, do I still have restrictions because I couldn't play as a child? Today, I say go for it. I'm the person on the excursions that wants to go bungee jumping and hiking. And I'm the cool grandma that gets on all of those dangerous rides that nobody else will go on because I'm not wasting a minute. Life is not predictable and it will change in a blink, and it has more than once in my life. So no more living out of fear. No apologies for what I was or what might be my condition. You have no control, but God does. And God will use that and your situation for a purpose. Presently, I haven't had a seizure since I was 7. I stopped taking medication when I was 18. My neurologist advised my husband and I not to have any children because his mother also had epilepsy. 2 kids, neither of them have epilepsy. My son did have febrile seizures, meaning he had seizures when he had a high temperature, every time he had got an ear infection. I do have lingering fears of possibly it returning. I developed a hand tremor a couple years ago, and that really scared me. I went to a neurologist. I insisted on a head CT and making sure that everything was fine there, and it was. Environmental impact, like a PTSD, strobe lights, or any flashing emergency light, like in a club or whatever, I can't tolerate them. It's not that I am triggered into a seizure, it's a fear thing because I was told all of my life, don't look at them. But they do use strobe lights when they do EEGs. because they want to and see if they can get the seizure activity to show on that graph. Some self-limiting beliefs that I retained for a long time is the you can't. I flick that away now because with Christ I can do all things. That I'm damaged, not enough, not wanted. That has been an ongoing thing for me for a very long time, up until I became a coach. And it will not stop me now. Jeremiah 1:5 and Jeremiah 29:11. I know that's one of Gigi's favorites, but Jeremiah 1:5 refers to, I knew you before you were formed in the womb and presented me and sanctified me as his, and then delivered me to go and minister to others. That's paraphrasing. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the purpose I have for you, a purpose to prosper and do well and do good things. Oop. Final tips. The brain in you, you are not your epilepsy. Your child is not their epilepsy. They can do so much more. They can go beyond what is expected. God is in the journey. The end of my story, as far as my personal story, is that 40 years after my last seizure, as a registered nurse for 25 years, I started a job at a prison. It was different. It gave great benefits. But the prison was in the location of the former State of New York Epilepsy Association. And that was the epilepsy colony that so many people wanted to place me in as a child. It had been converted to a prison. It wasn't lost on me that God led me there, that I was full circle. And while I was there, I earned a bachelor's degree. When I left there, I got 2 master's degrees. So no limitations. The only limitations on you are you. If anyone ever tries to put you in a box and tell you can't do something, stand up and tell them, watch me. So my call to action for you and anyone watching is be brave. This week, do one thing that you or someone else has doubted you could do, and enjoy. Thank you. Be blessed and be well. My screenshot is here. My information is on LinkedIn. I would love to be in contact with any of the watchers. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Judy. We truly appreciate you and very powerful. Thanks for being transparent. Now, my question to you, Judy, is what are some changes that you see now as far as medical assistance as folks are receiving now in this era compared to your era?
I think one of the biggest things that stands out immediately is the ability of parents to be there to support their children. That's a scary place to be for a child. Pediatricians have come a long way with advocating for children as far as learning disabilities. My son had a learning disability, and his pediatrician was calling the CSE office more than I was. That the medications have been fine-tuned and titrated down to smaller sizes. The doses I was getting as a young child were like adult doses, and my body couldn't absorb all of that. The educational system has come a long way in recognizing different ways to teach children at their level. The handicap laws, and I grew up during that time when the ADA laws came to be, have created a society and a sense of norm that there are different people, and that's okay. And they can do things even though they may look a little different, talk a little different, function different.
Thank you, Judy.
Mhm.
Now, today my talk is going to be, as far as the global epilepsy talk goes, it's going to be about how do I know? Because I've been there. Now, I want to circle back to what we spoke about earlier with Dr. Tanya Gold. So the question was what to do in a situation when you observe an individual in general having a seizure, and Dr. Tanya Gold gave several suggestions there earlier. And so I want to walk you back to the moment where I observed an individual having a seizure, and it was very, very difficult. And I say that because at that time I wasn't aware of what it was, and I wasn't aware of what was happening, but all I can see was this individual in pain. And so if you're listening in today, it's very, very important to, again, not just be aware of what epilepsy is, but really be educated about it. And so, and also too, understanding and knowing what to do if you are ever in the situation that I was in, because literally, and I just remember sitting there and I'm observing this individual in pain, literally in pain. And I, at that time, I didn't know what it was that was going on, but later on learned that it was an epileptic seizure. So again, if you're listening into this message today, or if you've been in a similar situation as I have, and maybe again, maybe you feel alone. I spoke to some other folks and they may have felt alone. I want to remind you that you're not alone. If you're on the other side now and you are aware of what epilepsy is, you're still learning. Again, you're not alone on that journey. And remember that God is with you wherever you go. As Judy mentioned earlier, one of my favorite verses is it's Joshua 1:9. Haven't I commanded you to be strong and courageous? Do not be afraid or discouraged, for your Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And so again, you're not alone. And when we talk about keeping the faith, I want to encourage you to hold on to faith and remember again that you're not alone, and keep going. And if you can just be there for whomever you know, or if you observe someone having an epileptic seizure, just be there, and support them, support that individual, and keep God first. Thank you. Now, our next speaker is Katie McHardy. Welcome, Katie. Katie is an amazing speaker, and she's also an autism mom, and we're so honored to have you here today, Katie.
Hi, thank you so much. I am truly so honored to be here. I am a mom to 4 children, 9, 7, 5, and 3. So my life is just it's a whole lot of fun. I have 3 children who are on the autism spectrum, and I have a son who is an epileptic. And so, you got your hands full. Like, I think I need that tattooed like on my forehead. Like, yes, my hands are full. My life is crazy. You can see it. It's there. And so that is what I talk about and share. Is I share a lot of my life raising. I call my kids, they're neurospicy, they're neurodivergent. We're a neurodivergent household, and that has become such a passion of mine, talking about what it's like being a neurodivergent individual parent raising neurodivergent kids. So I'm excited to share a little bit of my story of our son, and how it kind of changed our lives a little bit. My son was diagnosed with epilepsy at the age of 4. So he was, a seemingly perfectly happy child, up until the age of 4. And not that, he changed a whole ton, but we kind of went from, everything kind of going great, and then everything changing after that, versus, something happened at a very young age or at birth. We kind of went through, all the great milestones, and then everything kind of changed. And it was just crazy. Like, we have zero family history of seizures on either sides of our family. And it was actually my husband who experienced my son's seizure for the very first time. And it completely freaked my husband out. And we honestly don't know how long my son had been having seizures. He could have been having them for a while and we just didn't know, because he has absence seizures. And at the very beginning, when we first got diagnosed, they were really quick. Like, a lot of the times we would miss them. And so while we did get a diagnosis at 4, we honestly don't know how long he had been having them until we actually kind of were able to look at it. And so my husband was having a conversation with my son. It was right as he turned 4. And then all of a sudden, my son's eyes went halfway, and completely didn't acknowledge my husband, stopped mid-conversation, and my husband like freaked out. He had never seen anything like this before, because from our perspectives, a seizure is, the convulsive, the very big seizures, the ones that, are very scary, that are, what we typically see, or that what's portrayed maybe, on shows or TVs. And so watching my son do this was like, what is happening? That was very scary for us, because it wasn't what you think a typical seizure is. And then my son came out of the seizure and walked away as if like nothing happened. And it was so flabbergasting for my husband. And I have some medical knowledge. I went to school to be an occupational therapist, and so I have some reference of, seizures kind of. And my husband came in and told me his experience. I was like, I think he just had a seizure. Like, I'm not 100% sure, but from what you just encountered, I'm pretty sure that's what that was. And so we took him to our pediatrician for his well check, and we kind of told our pediatrician kind of what happened. And we love our pediatrician. We have, he's very on board with everything. He's like, well, he was like, because he's 4 and you've got like no family history, why don't we just kind of watch and see, let's figure out what this is. And I became a helicopter parent. I was watching my son 24/7. I was like, literally, like, I didn't want him going on the playground. I'm going to watch you, because heaven forbid you have a seizure and you're up high. Like, I can't catch you. He's a big kid. My son he's a big kid. And I'm Judy's mom. I'm 5 foot nothing. And there's no way I'm going to be able to catch my son if something happens. So I got very, very anxious. It was kind of a crazy time, because it was also COVID. There was a lot going on in our family. I had just had my 4th child. It was a lot. And so then we started seeing a pattern. We started seeing him have seizures, and a lot of them. So while his seizures may have been 10 to 30 seconds, he was having 20 to 50 of them every single day. Like, we was having a lot, because he was a very active kid. And so I wound up calling my pediatrician. I'm like, this is happening more every single day. And so we were gratefully referred to a neurologist, and he was having seizures while they're trying to put the electrodes on his head. And it was a wild experience, kind of amidst all of this, having, watching your child go through this, and him having absent seizures. He has no idea. He's 4. He has zero idea what is happening, what he's experiencing in his body. Like, he is completely unaware, because they're so short. He can't really tell us when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. It just happens, and you can't get him out of it. You have to ride the wave of the seizure. And so there was so much learning, like, on the spot. It was kind of like, there's no like, hey, this is a grand mal seizure. We have a rescue med. Here's what you can do. For us, it's like, I have to explain people, he's not going to respond to you. He's having a seizure. You need to give it a minute. Because as he got older, he became very active during his seizures. He would walk around. He would be seemingly very normal, but would appear like rude or not listening or disobedient into someone else's perspective because he's not answering you, he's not responding right away. And so I was constantly like, oh, he's having a seizure. Oh, can you wait just a second? Oh, like constantly kind of doing, you know, being this like middle person guide when we were out in public. When it got to a point where like I didn't want to go out in public. I didn't, because I'm like, he's going to have a seizure while we're here at Target. Like it just became very overwhelming. So the isolation that Judy was talking about as a parent became very much so, in addition to COVID and having 3 other children. Like I did, like we were at home a lot because I just didn't want to him to experience that, to also have other people. Like there's so much involved that I think we don't realize, that's maybe not talked about, the judgment, the things that you experience as the parent for your child. And sometimes you fear of putting that on your child, like the anxiety that I was constantly feeling for my son, and just kind of hovering because his seizures were getting longer as he got older. Like they were lasting a minute. Then he started having cluster seizures where he was having seizures back to back to back to back. And, you know, it became a lot. And so my 7-year-old, he also has autism and he has ARFID. And ARFID is kind of new. It's like extreme picky eating. It's classified as an eating disorder now. And so our doctor, our neurologist, she was like, when they did the EEG, not only did they see epilepsy or absent seizures, but they also saw additional abnormal brain activity. And she was like, because he's so young and we're seeing all of these other things on the EEG, I think medication would be a really good route. He's young and we don't know what else down the road is going to happen. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. She's like, if you don't, he, you know, puberty, teens, he may grow out of it kind of. Then that's what they see as far as a trend. And so we were like, okay, great. It took 5 different medications for my son because of his ARFID to find a medication that would work for him. And that's exhausting as a parent. That's exhausting as a child, trying to find a medication that's going to work for your child that they will take. That I'm not forcing my child to take a medication. Like, what's the point in trying to, like, you know, that's a whole other can of worms. And so, you know, we tried various medications in different forms, which I'm grateful we have a variety of medications and forms and things that, you know, we could do. And we found like the dream medication. Like it was the one medication that my son was going to take, and we were so excited. And then there were manufacturing issues and our pharmacy couldn't get the medication. It was constantly on back order. And I'm like, my son needs this medicine. It's the only one he will take. And, you know, you try and express this to a pharmacy who has like zero control over like the medications, or the doctors who are doing their very best to work with you in your situation. And it was just, it's so much. And I didn't realize for a long time, like how much mentally and emotionally and physically taxing, exhausting. Like I reached burnout on a daily basis because it is a lot, and you don't realize like how much you're doing in your brain and how much that affects your body, your relationship with my husband. Like it becomes a lot. And I loved what Renee was on earlier, talking about how like you constantly have to come back to yourself as an individual, coming back to you as a partnership with your husband, and you know, working together and being in constant communication with each other. We actually had a very scary, not scary, but I'll share a story to kind of give you perspective of what it was like to have a absent seizure, like in public. So I have 4 kids. So I put it was a very nice springy day towards the end of the school year. And I was like, let's go on a quick walk to my daughter's bus stop and go pick her up from school. Like, this is going to be so great. Like, it's going to be 15 minutes. We're going to go pick her up and then we're going to walk back home, right? Like, easy peasy lemon squeezy. No. So I have my 2 little ones in the stroller, and then I've got my 4 or 5-year-old with me. And I'm like, we're just going to walk across the street. We cross the busy street, and then we're going to go to the bus stop. So we make it to the bus stop. We pick up sister just fine, no problems. On our way back, we're in the middle of the busy street, and my son is having a seizure. I wish I could make this up. I wish I could lie and be like, just kidding. No. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like, we're in like the yellow part, but it's still a busy road. My son is having a seizure. Like, he is unresponsive to anyone. And he's like doing circles in the street because he's having a seizure. And I'm like panicking. So I have my daughter take the stroller and finish crossing the street. Gratefully, the cars that were coming, in both directions could see what was happening with my son. Praise Jesus, that like he's in the divider and not like, actively in the street. So I'm like trying so hard to because there were occasional times where we could kind of pull him out of it a little bit. We could kind of like, talk to him. We could do things to kind of like, occasionally, it didn't happen all the time if his seizures were short enough. This was a longer one, of course. It was like a minute long. I'm like, Landon, we've got to go. I'm trying to like guide him along as he's having the seizure, and he comes out of it and he's terrified because he sees that we're still in the middle of the street, and he just breaks down and he feels so bad because he has no idea what's happening. He sees me in distress. Like, I can't imagine from his perspective coming out of a seizure, seeing his mom completely freaked out because of what just happened. And I do my very best to explain, like, it's not your fault. You're not in trouble. Like, this is absolutely out of your control. It was a very scary moment for mommy. And, it was one time where I'm like, I will never forget that, nor do I ever want to experience that ever again. So we drove to go pick up this from the bus stop from then forward. But it's been a journey. And I think like, I'm going to pull up my notes because there were a couple other things that I wrote down. But it's been such an incredible journey. And, there are so many times where I think as parents or guardians or caretakers of our children, we could say like, gosh, I could have done this. I wish I would have done this. Or maybe had I, we can do that so often as parents. Like, I do that still, like, especially with my autistic children. I'm like, had we caught it earlier, had we done something different, we are so critical of ourselves as parents, as individuals, and I'm just like, you can do that from sun up to sundown, that like, we can do that. But in reality, like, that is not going to help me. It's not going to help my mental state. It's not going to help me show up for him and advocate him any better than me just recognizing that, like, I show up for him every day. And that's more than I can say for a lot of people, that I do my very best. I show up for them. I'm doing the work that I feel like I need to do for my son, for our family, for our circumstances. And that's the best. Like, sometimes it's just being there for your children, Like it doesn't have to be like big, extreme things, but sometimes it's truly just being there, being their voice, being their safe people in a world that's going to not be so safe for them as they get older and as they navigate this. And so it's knowing that like I can at least do that for my child. I can be that safe person. I can be their voice. I can be their advocate. I can give them an opportunity to hopefully, as they get older, learn to advocate for themselves and use their voice as they get older. And I'm very proud to say that as of this summer, my son is seizure free. He'll be seizure free this summer for an entire year. Praise God. He is not on medication because we were having such issues with that. We did see a significant change in my son with the medication. While I do believe it did help, like there were so many things where I'm like, my son did change, like Tanya talked about, we did see a lot of changes, but I am grateful that we were able to implement what we did at the time. That's what the knowledge that we had and what we were given. Again, it's like, gosh, if I could go back, would I change anything? Would I do anything different? And I'm like, no, because this was our journey and we learned so much more. And now we can move forward with what we've learned and what we've experienced. And we can just take that with us. And, he is an incredibly bright, smart, sweet human being. And now he wants to be active and he wants to do all of like those boy things. And I'm still like, just not football, okay? Like, can we do any sport other than football, please? You can do whatever you want, just no football. But he's built like a football player. Like he's a big kid. And I'm like, okay. So it's truly a journey. And that's what I look at it as. Like it's a journey, it's a marathon, it's something that you just take like one hurdle, one step at a time. And just it's great. And you kind of you have to ride the wave sometimes and kind of like Jesus take the wheel. And then other times you can be like, no, I got the wheel today. I'm going to be totally great. And, learning to do all of those things. So thank you so much, Gigi, for allowing me to speak and share my story today.
Absolutely. And hang tight because we do have some comments that came in for you and also some questions. So it says here, Katie McHardy, my mother discovered my absent seizures by actually putting her finger on my eye. I didn't flinch or blink. Helicopter parents. My father broke down French doors because I went into their bedroom and locked the door. He panicked because he couldn't see me. And it says here, you're doing your best and he will do great things because of your support and loving. And also ride the waves. Amen.
Yes.
Awesome. And then the questions that we have here, Katie. So the first question is why the individual does not respond right away. You mentioned your son was not able to respond right away. Can you explain why for the folks who are not aware of why that may be?
From what I have learned and researched, that's the absence part of the absence seizure. Like for wherever the seizure is happening in their brain, they basically zone out. Like he has zero awareness of what is going on. He has no awareness that the seizure is happening. And so wherever the seizure is happening in the brain, it just kind of shuts him off for however long. So like my son at the beginning, it was short, 10 to 15, maybe 30 seconds. And then as I got older, it would be for like a minute. But that's why it's called absent seizures, because he basically goes absent. Like he's just kind of a blank canvas. So I don't know like brain anatomy or like where in the brain it's happening as far as, because it's going to be different for each child. And each child is going to experience absent seizures very differently. But that's kind of how I describe it, is absent seizures. They're absent for that time that the seizure is happening.
And so that's how you would define absent seizures, correct? Because that was the next question. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. They're absent. They're not there for that seizure time. Yeah.
Awesome. And the next question is, because you mentioned autism, can you explain the difference between autism and epilepsy?
Absolutely. So autism is an intellectual disability that comes with a wide range of spectrum disabilities. For example, my 5-year-old who is on the autism spectrum, he also had a speech delay. You know, he is behind his peers when it comes to academics. But he is like one of the most social, happy people you will ever meet on this planet. And then my daughter, who is also autistic, for her, she has like, she's never had a seizure in her life. So they are very different. And a seizure is something where the chemicals and the chemistry and the synapses that are happening in your brain are misfiring. It's an actual like misfire of connections in your brain that are not working. Whereas autism has genetic links, so does epilepsy. Epilepsy can have genetic factors to it, and so can autism. But autism has to do with your intellectual disability, how you do socially, how you do academically. It can also be coincide with ADHD, OCD, you know, again, speech impairments, and things like that. So while some autistic individuals may have epilepsy, not all epileptics have autism. Some may have both, like my son does. He has epilepsy and autism, but not one is going to have the other, or other vice versa in each case. So it's again kind of a case by case basis. And but I don't believe my son's epilepsy caused his autism or that they were connected in any way.
Well, thank you. Now you do have some another comment that came in. It says it's like having an earthquake in your brain. There are levels, and just earthquake, there are aftershocks and rebuilding.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And we would try and ask my son, like, if he could tell us, like, what, you know, he was experiencing, but he was so young at the time. I don't think he had the language. But I bet that would be a really good description, especially for a child experiencing something that they really can't explain. It's like an earthquake or something, you know, that is happening inside them that a lot of times, especially children, can't really describe. They don't have the language for what is going on inside their body. And so you as the parent have to kind of learn to read their body language. You have to learn to read a lot of external cues for your children, because your child isn't going to have the language, especially my son who is 4, had the language of what is going on internally, not only just in his brain, but in his body, like what he is experiencing. Because some of his triggers, when he was tired or overstimulated, that's when we saw clusters, and that's when we saw a lot of his seizures. But he can't always tell us, like, I'm tired, I'm overstimulated, or, you know, because he would fall asleep at dinner. He was just kind of, you could just tell his body was working so hard. His body was on overdrive all the time, trying to overcompensate for what was going on up here. But again, that language just wasn't there. And so you kind of have to be that for them, and being like, okay, I can recognize this has been a lot for you. Maybe we can take a break. Maybe we can find an environment that's not as stimulating for you today, because you've been to preschool, you've been around a lot of people. So you have to learn to like be hyper vigilant and aware with your children, because they don't always have the ways to express what's going on.
Excellent advice. Learn your child's body language. Now, we do have 3 remaining questions here for you, Katie, before we move to our last 2 speakers and then closing prayer. So the next question is, you mentioned a neurologist. Why should an individual seek a neurologist or go to one?
That's their specialty. Like, my pediatrician does not have the medical training to give that diagnosis. Like, you would not go to your like your regular doctor if you had cancer. You're going to go see an oncologist. You're going to go see someone who has additional training and expertise in that specific area. Like, if I'm going to go to you know, get a facial done or go get my nails done or go get a hair done. I want someone who has that training, that expertise, that additional knowledge of what I'm wanting to get. So I'm going to go to a neurologist who has experience in seizures, in epilepsy, who has had the additional training, who can then better educate me, because this is not my area of expertise. And then they can also help our pediatrician understand as well. So they're going to be a great mediator for you, for the other doctors that you're working with your child. And I feel like having additional people who can have your back, who can be there to better advocate for your child, the more the better. So I'm like, we have our pediatrician, we have our neurologist, we have therapists, we have all of these other people in our community to best support our children.
Great advice. And thank you for sharing your story and the parents' perspective today. Very powerful. Now, the next question is, you mentioned experiencing burnout. What is your advice to parents who may be experiencing something similar to you and your husband?
Great question. I love that. I had to learn to be very vocal about my needs and what I needed, and release the shame and the guilt, which is hard. It's really hard, because you're taught as the mother, like, you do all things and you kind of put your needs on the back burner. I realized there were so many times I'm like, I'm becoming a version of myself that I don't recognize in the mirror. And I didn't want my kids to see that and think that they were the problem. And so I had to be very vocal. And so, like, for me, it was just simply, I take a bath at every single night. Like, it's my time. It's nothing major. It's nothing like exciting, but I get a bath, because baths for me are like zen. So it was kind of trial and error, figuring out what was going to work best for me and for my husband and for our family. Like, I know at the end of the night, I can take a bath before, we do bedtime, after dinner, or the occasional, like, I do physically have to leave the house. So I make sure it works with my husband, or be like, I'm going to go for like an hour. I just need to go. I need to I bought, noise canceling headphones have been an absolute game changer, because sometimes I can't leave the home. Sometimes it's just not an option, but I do get very overstimulated also as a parent. And there are just times where I'm like, I need to cancel out the noise a little bit. And my kids know, if mommy has her headphones on, my kids see me with my headphones on enough where they kind of recognize, okay, we're gonna give mommy her space. And again, I think it's letting your children know, hey, this is where mommy is at today. I think it's very powerful to let your kids know, like, mommy is feeling overstimulated. Mommy is just feeling a lot of feelings inside of her body. And this is what mommy is going to do. And, kind of just helping your children know that, like, you also are a human being, and that you are experiencing all of these things, because then it's going to help them know that they can also be vocal about what they're experiencing as well. I didn't know what burnout was until I got very low, to a very low point. So I wish I would have, one, recognized where I was at in my body and where my mental state was at a lot earlier, before I got to like a very low point in my mental health. And two, not being afraid to vocalize to my husband and my kids that I am struggling and that I needed to seek professional help. And I did seek professional help, and not being afraid to admit that I also need help in this journey, and that I cannot do it by myself. And that, like, a lot of the times I think I can do it by myself, that like, I'm just, tough mom, and, I can take on the world. and I can, but I need help doing that. I can't do it by myself because I've got to take care of myself so that I can be there for my kids to take care of them.
Great advice. It's okay to ask for help. Very powerful. And the last question for you, Katie, here. You mentioned that your child now is seizure free. And how, and also too, did age have a factor in that? And some folks may be wondering, what about the age? So can you explain there for us?
Yeah. It is, the age is a possibility. It could be he's 7 now. I think there were a lot of factors. I think because we caught it early enough and we tried a variety of medications, that there were a variety of factors. One, we caught it early enough and that we got early intervention. 2, medications. I think the medications did play a role in helping him. We also did other therapies. We did occupational therapy, which I think is huge, and I'm a huge advocate for additional therapies outside of just medication. I think occupational therapy has been so incredibly powerful for him. And, you know, sometimes, you know, you never know what's going on in their brain and what actually helps, because, you know, of his severe ARFID and his picky eating. You know, I don't think his diet or food had any role to play. I know some epileptics, the keto diet works really great for them. But sometimes you kind of just throw spaghetti and you kind of try a variety of things and kind of see what sticks and what's going to work for your child. Because it got to a point where we could no longer access my son's medication because it was constantly on back order, and they were having such a hard time with distribution. And it was the one medication that my son was going to take. We kind of just got to a point where we were like, how much longer are we going to do this? At what point is it beneficial for us, for my son? And so we kind of just weaned him off of it. You know, obviously also in talking with his neurologist, you know, we were in constant communication with them, letting them know that like, this is what's happening, this is what we're experiencing. And so yeah, and I'm still kind of like Judy, like, I don't know if they will come back. I kind of, you know, wonder like as life gets more stressful, as he gets more involved in things, like there is the potential for them to come back and to have, you know, stress and life trigger seizures, since that is kind of what we saw with him as he was younger. And so, you know, we do watch him, you know, and kind of just, we keep our eye on him, and we see his neurologist on a yearly basis and keep her updated with all of that. So I think it can be a variety of factors of kind of just trying things, and sometimes you know, and sometimes you don't, and it's a surprise.
Thank you, Katie. Very powerful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, our next speaker is Lisa, and she's an epilepsy advocate. Welcome, Lisa. Lisa, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Okay, there seems to be a lag, perhaps hopping out and hopping back in to the conference. We'll circle back to you, Lisa. Our next speaker is Apostle Shufrana Castleberry. Welcome. She's an international keynote speaker. Welcome. You're muted. That's okay. Take your time. You're still muted. Just give it a moment there. We can't hear you. Perhaps hopping out and hopping back in to the conference. Okay, at this time, we'll circle back to you, Shafrana. Again, perhaps hopping out and hopping back in. I want to circle back to Judy real quick. Judy, the question for you is, what do you have any advice for families that are going through something similar to what you and your family went through in regards to epilepsy?
I think first of all, communicate with one another. The more information you give your nucleus family, even the children of, the siblings, to understand, advocating, like Katie said, to their circle of influence. It might be aunts, uncles, cousins, family reunions. It's going to be different for that child, and to have a attitude of compassion and understanding. And Katie, the one question I had for her was, does she have a circle of friends, family, caregivers, respite, so that both her and her husband can step away and preserve their own, their own energies and re-energize?
I do. It took me a while, I think, to find the people, because like you were saying, sometimes it is hard to find people who do understand what it's like to have either neurodivergent or a child who is, extra special. So I do have I have a best friend who I am in touch with, but I also think like my husband and I don't get out on dates often. And I think that was something we kind of had to come to terms with, but we do a lot of dates at home. So we may not always get to, get outside the home, but we do make time for ourselves on a regular basis, whether it's picking a show or, we just spend time cleaning the kitchen or picking up the house, or like going on day dates, and we just bring our 3-year-old. So I think you have to get really creative sometimes when it comes to like you and your partner and finding ways to connect in different ways, because you're going to be mentally and emotionally exhausted from so many things. So you have to get creative, and being willing to kind of like step outside of yourself and see the other person and what they're experiencing. And again, it's just that keeping that line of communication open and being willing to listen to their wants and needs and them reciprocating yours. But it is hard to find. I feel like as a parent, your circle gets smaller. And then when you have, special needs and, children, like it does get hard. And so you have to like put yourself out there. I found some really great like Facebook groups with moms who also have, neurodivergent children, which was so helpful, because it's like, we may not always get together, but we can Marco Polo, we can text, we can, connect on social media. So we may not always see each other all the time, but we know that like we are a safe place for each other, that there's no judgment. And so sometimes it's just like scary to put yourself out there, but knowing that like you are absolutely not alone in this situation, even though it may feel so incredibly lonely.
So glad you do that for yourself and for your family, because it's so important. I'll get off and let the next speaker speak.
Yes, thank you, Judy, and thank you, Katie. Great advice. Now as we mentioned, we were going to circle back to Apostle Castleberry there, and Lisa. Apostle
Yes.
Castleberry, great, we can hear you now.
Praise the Lord. Thank you so very much, Gigi. Thank you for having me. It's a great honor. And I'd like to say hello to the panel as well. I'm here to give my testimony of having epilepsy as a child. At age 5, I was with my father. I was a father's daughter, just followed him everywhere he went in that red pickup truck. And If I were not there, the whole neighborhood knew it because I would be yelling and screaming, I want to go with my daddy, I want to go with my daddy. But this particular day, we went to the country to go visit an aunt of mine. And we were going up the hill in his red truck on this clay dirt road that was kind of slick from rain. And then there was a tractor coming down the hill, and we hit head on. And when we hit head on, my head hit the dashboard of the car and the truck. And then about, back then they didn't take children to the doctor when you had things like that happen. You just kind of say, okay, you're all right, and just go about your business. And so about 2 weeks later, my father was spraying water over me in the summertime, and I began to have a seizure. First, they thought it was just a fear of water, but we found out later on that it was from my hitting my head when we had the accident. And so that began the times of seizures. Um, and I had grand mal seizures and from age 5 until age 14. But in between all of that, like Judy said, that going back and forth to the doctor, I went every month to see the neurologist and doing all the testings and going to the hospital. And I remember at age 9, I was put in the hospital for like, I think it was 2 weeks, where they put you in a dark room and they test your brain from the light to the darkness. And most time it was dark all the time. Like you said, it was a very scary time at that young age because your parents did not stay with you in the hospital. You would just see them whenever they would visit, and plus they're working also. So I had lots and lots of seizures, sometimes in school, and was embarrassed. Children would talk about you and hate on you and call you names, you're crazy and all these kind of things, when you're a child. And it really makes you feel really bad, especially when you had one at school. And then sometime I would get up to get ready to go to school, and I would have a seizure before going to school. And I took the phenobarb 1 grain 3 times a day at age 5, which was a high dosage. And then what they were doing is testing different drugs on me. And I think the first drug they tested on me was the Dilantin. And I happened to almost died from it because I was allergic to it. And that was at an early age. So they just kind of switched drugs back and forth for a while until they found that the phenobarb was the best thing that worked for me. And I would just have a seizure at any time. And it's been very difficult for me talking about it up until about the past 6 years. And I'm now 63 years of age. Because it's so traumatic to you when you are going through those episodes as a child, and not quite understanding what exactly is going on. And I would have the auras, like she said, I would get like the funny odors or smells and stuff like that, or sounds, or I would see shadows. And then I knew that the seizure would be coming on. And until today, I am very sensitive to light, loud sounds. I'm sound sensitive, and then certain odors I can't tolerate either. And by the age of 19, well, actually it was 18. I was leaving Georgia going to Michigan, and my father was a pastor, so he prayed for me to be healed. And he prayed, he anointed me in oil, he laid hands on me. And I didn't realize that I was healed, but I was believing God by faith at age 18 that I would be healed from epilepsy. So I went on and I moved to Michigan to live with my grandmother. That was October of 1980. And by March of 1981, and I would pray still, for my healing, not knowing I was already healed. And so a bottle of phenobarb for 30 days was like $90. So I took the bottle of medication on March the 17th. I'll never forget it. March the 17th in 1981. And I poured the whole bottle of phenobarb down the commode. And I just bought that bottle. And I said, God, if my father says that I'm healed when he prayed for me, I'm going to believe you that I am healed. This is at age 19. And God healed me then. He healed me. I was so grateful and so, oh Jesus, thank you, Lord. Oh, glory, hallelujah. And I pray for everybody, children or adults that have epilepsy, that God will heal them as well. And I have not taken a phenobarb since age of 19. I stopped having seizures at age of 14, but I was still taking the medication. And I also visited a neurologist until I was 18 years old. And I felt so terrible sitting in the office. You got all these little kitty chairs in there, and I'm in the neurologist, and I'm 18 years old, and I look like a giant over these little children. You know what I'm saying? And so, but I realized it was for my good all those years. You know, he was trying to help me through it. Dr. Mays, I never forget him. He's since passed away now, but that was sort of my journey of going through epilepsy over, you know, many years, and get called all kind of horrible names, you know, and children just sort of like you say, you're isolated. They don't want to have anything to do with you because you're the oddball, and they don't understand exactly what's going on, but they know it's not normal to them. You see what I'm saying? And so I think I maybe in school I may have had one or two friends, you know, and then if someone said something, um, why you her friend or whatever, she's the crazy one or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Then they'll turn against you. They would turn against you. So I just wanted to give just a little brief testimony of some of the things that I went through. And also I couldn't get excited. You just imagine a child can't get excited. I couldn't get excited about anything. I would have a seizure. So my mother says, "Oh, don't get too excited, Shafron. You may have a seizure." You see what I'm saying? Or I couldn't get upset. Oh, don't get upset about certain things. I was not allowed to go to funerals as a child. Couldn't, because they would think that I would get too upset. Even up to the age, I think, of about 16 or 18, when a dear friend of mine had passed away, and I was not allowed to go to her funeral. But her brother lived on top of the hill. We lived at the bottom of the hill. So he and I had gotten together, say they won't let us go to the funeral. So we met on our bicycles at the top of the hill. The church was at the other bottom of the hill. And we stayed there on our bicycles as if we were in services until the service was over for, you know, it was his sister, but they wouldn't allow him to go either because he had seizures as well. So we just kind of got together and had our own little going away, you know, for her on our bicycle. So, so that was part of my history of epilepsy. And now when I'm around people who have epilepsy, I can discern in the spirit of God that that person is epileptic. And I met this lady in a store, a department store in Michigan. Her son was at the time was 4 years of age, and I just kind of felt a strange feeling come over me, and I said, "Let me go and ask her if her son is epileptic." And I did, and she says, "Yes, he is." She says, "How did you know that?" I said, "I just discerned it in the spirit," and I asked to pray for her son for healing. And so once I prayed for her son for healing, I had given her my telephone number. She called me within 2 weeks. She said he's not had a seizure since she prayed for him. So God has given me this gift to pray for people for healing that have seizures, and they're healed from having seizures. So I just give God all the glory, the praise, the worship, and the honor, because it's no one but him that did it. I didn't do it. My father didn't do it. He was just a conduit that God used. The anointing of God is what destroyed the yokes. And that's Isaiah 10 and 27. And so we thank God for the anointing of God destroying that yoke of epilepsy, which comes under the dumb and deaf spirit. So we just give God praise. When you pray, you bind and you rebuke and you curse that dumb and deaf spirit. You reverse the curse back to Satan, his evil doers. You command it to dry up from the root. The fruits fall up and die and go into dry places, seeking rest and finding none, and never return again in Jesus' name. Then you loose God's resurrection life upon your son, your daughter, or whatever the adult's brain. Loose resurrection life upon their brain and speak the blood of Jesus over their brain, because there's life in the blood of Jesus. And that's part of the prayer that you pray. And you pray that their brain will be transformed and renewed by the Holy Ghost and get in line with the word of God, because they are the healed of the Lord by Jesus' stripes. In Jesus' mighty name, we pray. Amen. Thank you so very much for the opportunity of being on here, Gigi. May God bless you, and I love you. Take care.
Likewise, and thank you, Apostle Castleberry. We truly appreciate you. We do have our last speaker here, and then we're going to close out in prayer. Judy, we're asking you to do the closing prayer. Just a heads up. Lisa, are you ready?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry about all that. Hello, everyone. Greetings, my epilepsy warriors and supporters. We're having technical difficulties. I'm honored to be here with you this evening. My name is Lisa Harrison. Everybody calls me Miss Lisa. It was a beautiful fall day in Ohio in 2026. The leaves were beautiful of red, orange, and yellow, along with that old brownish, tannish color. Quite a few of the leaves have already fallen, as there were many branches um, that were empty. The sky was real blue. There was like a whisper of clouds um, over the sky. And I decided that day I was going to take a walk to my friend's house who lived just a few streets away. So as I was walking down my block, the wind, it was just as crisp as in the fall day, and it blew across my face. So as I hit the corner, heading towards the crosswalk, and to cross over the street, the light turned green. No worries. It's a beautiful day, I said to myself. And then suddenly, things seemed to become familiar, a weird familiar, like I had been here before. I mean, I had been here before, but I mean, like a deja vu. You know what I mean? And I looked around and I felt like I was underwater. I was like floating, but standing still. My heart began to beat so fast and it seems so loud. And I started to breathe heavy and I noticed the light had changed. And instinctively, I walked across the street because I was on a destination. And now, how or what I looked like crossing that street, Lord only knows. But as I continued to walk up the way, it started to get worse. I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing. My head was like in a bowl of water. I just couldn't figure out what was going on. I kept asking myself, "But I got to get home. What is this?" So I turned around and I prayed the Our Father. Those who are not familiar, it's the Our Father who art in heaven. And how I got home or the memory of the walk back, I couldn't tell you. Now, did I go to the doctor immediately? No, because it passed over after I got home and sat down for a while. I thought maybe I didn't eat this morning. I'm under a lot of stress. That's got to be it. Until it happened again. I was in my daughter's room, and her closet, which was painted yellow, was really long, not particularly wide, but long. But it reminded me of my abusers and what they did to me when I was little in that closet, just like, yes, I was molested as a child. So as you can see, one would equate that with a flashback. On top of that, my daughter was about to turn 4, which was the same age that it began for me in regards to that trauma. So, 1 + 1 is 2, right? Made perfect sense. But it kept coming back and more intense. So I said, okay, let's make an appointment. Now, looking back, I was on county insurance. Yeah, single mother, no support, not much money. But mind you, at one point in time, oh, sorry about. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, but as I was saying, at one point in time, I did have a career in which I had real insurance and benefits. And trust me, there is a difference. So I go to the doctor's office and describe everything I'm going through. You're experiencing anxiety attacks, he says. Look, I'll prescribe you. I said, no, 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 no. I don't want any prescriptions. I'll do some research, maybe therapy. He said, okay, sounds good. I'll give you some referrals. Okay, great. Now, at this time, I had not been smoking marijuana. And I'm not sure if I was even smoking cigarettes, to be honest. But what I did know is that at a time, marijuana was one of those things that mellowed you out, to function, etc. But I had stopped it because I had a child. I was trying to do a career, you know, trying to make life better for ourselves. But at that point, I couldn't function, and they were consistent. My daughter, I taught her about anxiety attacks. You know, mommy is having anxiety attacks, sweetie. Uh, my poor baby. I think about all the she went through growing up because, as you know, she got older and she could see them coming. So I started back smoking, to be honest, until it went on for, let's see, it started in 2006. It went on until January 30th of 2012, 6 years, undiagnosed. I had my first day of training on January 30th, 2012. But that morning I woke up, I noticed that I went to the bathroom by myself. And at this time, we were living with my sister. Overwhelmed, confused, I got it together. Um, I showered, I cleaned up the spot on the mattress, covered it up with cloth, left my sister a note, knowing that when I come back, we'll disinfect it. I jumped on the rapid, which we like the subway if you're from New York, but upper ground. I went to the location, arrived, I'm sitting in the front, ready to take notes. I'm like, yes, I get to work again, out of my sister's house. Let's go. Instructor appeared in front of the room, slender, young African American man. I remember he had green top and khaki shorts, ready to take notes. And then the next thing I know, I wake up with two men looking over at me. What happened? You had a seizure. What? I remember saying. Next thing I know, I remember getting a spinal tap because, and those who've ever had it before know that you know, that I had a towel in my mouth because I was biting it. And I was screaming. I don't remember what else happened, except I do remember waking up, looking around, and at the foot of my bed were four men dressed in scrubs, so I assumed they were doctors. God, whoo, they were so fine. I'm not talking handsome, I'm talking Dr. Dreamy. If you know, you know. I just remember saying, is this Grey's Anatomy? this, but this was the day that they finally took me serious. The ER doctor came in, immediately put me on lamotrigine, which is a generic version of Lamictal. And of course, we went through the tests and the MRIs and the CAT scans for them to tell me that I had a lesion on my brain. So they started me off with the cocktails and the journaling I did. And for an additional 2 to 3 years, I was transferred to two additional doctors. My first neurologist quit. The second one never answered my calls, even though I was having clusters. And the third one, who was supposed to be the top neurologist, he just kind of blew me off. So I said, okay, enough is enough. I'm tired. Tired of the cocktails not working. I've been part of my talk at this point from having a seizure in my sleep. So I decided to try another neurologist and got blessed with one of the top neurologists at the Cleveland Clinic here in Cleveland, Ohio. And on the first visit, she told me what was wrong. I had explained to her that I had a lesion. She looked at me confused and was like, no, you have an abnormality. She said, look right here. And she showed me the MRI. My right hippocampus looks like a gumball, whereas my left hippocampus looks normal, which is if you take a cauliflower and cut it in half, that's what it looks like. So, yeah, I have right temporal lobe epilepsy. Now, also the years being misdiagnosed, to be honest, it made me very, very angry. And I must say, many, and I mean many, people poll and they've done polls, were treated based on your insurance, if you have any, along with your race, especially women. In, what was it? I think it was 2022, Tulane University did a study. They collected data from 2012 to 2016 in all 50 states. They talked to over 11,000 physicians, and overall, Medicaid patients were offered 27.6% fewer appointments than privately insured. Hispanics and Black women had the lowest numbers compared to white women. Males received fewer appointments compared to white women. Medicaid status alone, let me say it again, Medicaid status alone was sufficient for many of these physicians to reject patients outright, or by using the term not accepting new patients. That's a problem. In JAMA, July 15, 2022, they did an article on structural racism and the iniquities to access Medicaid funded quality cancer care in the United States. Urban Institute in 2022 talked about the same inequities. PNHP, which is Physicians for National Health Program in 2020, also did the same study in 2015 and 2017, where they found out through the study adults in Medicaid received more discrimination due to race or skin color relative to those with employee-sponsored coverage. And it goes on. So we have a multitude of things we have here. We have Medicaid versus private care. We have racial discrimination and gender discrimination. I learned all these going through my experience. And with my little story, would you not go get a second opinion? So to all of everyone out there listening and watching this, if something is wrong, you don't know them doctors, you don't know their backgrounds. Go get a second opinion. Go get a third opinion. You keep coming back or go to another doctor until they give you an answer. It's no longer acceptable to say you have epilepsy, but you don't know where it's coming from. It's no longer acceptable to say, oh, you're having anxiety attacks when it might not be. I've been there. I'm still angry. I'll be very honest with you. Because I think about if I would have went and got a second opinion, all the years that was lost, all of the income that I lost, what would my life have been? I probably would have been a multimillionaire instead of a couple years from now. So there's a lot of things that we have to take care of when it comes to health care in this country and possibly all over the world. I've also discovered I have ADHD. That's my fault because I should have did a little more research. So much time, money, careers, lives, our children's lives. We sit back and think, what could I have been? Please go get that second opinion. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for sharing your testimony. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your testimony. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you to all of our sponsors, and thank you all for listening in, whether you join us on the front end or the back end. We truly appreciate you. And now at this time, we are going to close out this conference, the Global Epilepsy Conference, with a prayer by Judy Schwingle. Take it away.
I like start my prayers with a nice deep breath and just let out anything negative in the body. God, oh God, our powerful, almighty, all-knowing, ever-present Lord, please be with us. Let us know as we close this Global Epilepsy Conference that our words have touched and impacted the lives and minds of others. We've uplifted and informed many. Send the Holy Spirit's power, Lord, and sanctification and healing to the children discussed today, Katie's son and Renee's daughter. Be with them, touch them, Lord. Send the Holy Spirit's power into them to heal them. Expel any presence of seizures totally. Through our belief, this can be so. Through us, from you. I thank you for Dr. Tanya, and who has such a great heart and passion for treating epileptics. May this conference, and it's just a moment for Apostle's wonderful testimony. I think we are sisters in Christ in that way. We have very similar stories. May this conference reach and touch the hearts and minds of all who hear these speakers and testimonies. Their testimonies must inform, empower, and transform the minds and souls of the audience. Through honoring of you and love for you, Lord, allow this group of women to go forth and have a powerful, powerful impact in your name for your glory. Amen.
Amen. Very powerful. Thank you, Judy, and thank you all. And that wraps up our conference here today. God bless you all and be safe. Thank you.
So, God bless.